Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we continue our ongoing coverage of the Russia-Ukrainian war. And as I had talked about yesterday, I wanted to try and do a more in-depth coverage of what we were seeing, especially over the last 48 hours plus. So it does appear that the Russian forces are simply looking to turn the lights out inside of Ukraine. We have started to see even some of the more diehard pro-Ukrainian individuals start to leave the country. It's amazing what happens when you turn the lights off, when you turn the power off, when you turn the heat off. Most people that live in Western civilization, and especially in extremely cold climates. I myself live in an area where it can get very cold in the winter. And when you turn off the power, you turn off the heat, you, compounding that, turn the water off. If it gets real cold and you have no heat, your pipes freeze. Much less going after, from a military perspective, going after water pumping stations. But it would appear that the Russians have decided to adopt the strategy of crushing the Ukrainian average citizen's will to fight. The YouTuber Denis Davidov, he fairly popular YouTuber who covers the war, who goes over the current disposition of forces. Former Ukrainian airline pilot, obviously very much pro-Ukrainian, has left the country. And again, once you turn that power off, once you can not heat your home, your internet goes away. The ability to communicate with people just a few miles away changes the perspective. Some would say this is an act of terrorism by Russian forces. Well, if this is an act of terrorism by Russian forces, then it is safe to say that operations that took place against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan during World War II were also acts of terrorism, because the same military strategy, and at times far exceeding what the Russians are doing right now, were implemented against the Germans, against the Japanese. Whole cities were firebombed. Nuclear weapons were exploded twice over Japanese cities. This is just the nature of war. And because of the setbacks that the Russians have faced in ongoing operations, they are adopting a new strategy, a new way of fighting this war. And it may be starting to work. We'll have to see. but we're seeing almost daily volleys of cruise missiles, drone attacks against Ukrainian infrastructure, power generation, infrastructure. Very interesting to see this take place, and it will be very interesting to see if the Ukrainian people have the wherewithal to continue the fight under these conditions, or would it be more pragmatic, more viable for the Ukrainians to reach some agreement with the Russians? Would the Ukrainians lose territory? Absolutely. In a war, one side loses territory. There are very few cases throughout history in which war did not see one side lose territory. Furthermore, as I've talked about in the past, Russia, as a neighbor to Ukraine, is not going away. Could the relationship between Ukraine and the United States change? Absolutely. Without a doubt. But the simple fact is, Russia will simply not pack up and leave. It's not going anywhere. So the Ukrainians and the Russians are at some point are going to have to find a way to live with each other. Now that could look vastly different in terms of who wins this conflict. But let's pull up the battlefield maps here real quick and see what's going on. First, we're going to pull up the area near Kherson. Just want to make sure that this is working correctly, and I think we are good. OBS, gotta love it. So first, we've heard reports. Obviously, the Russians have withdrawn east of the Dnieper River. They have given up control of the capital of Kherson region. The Ukrainian 28th Mechanized Brigade and 59th Motorized Brigade and 73rd Marine Special Operations Brigade has moved into that area now, once controlled by Russian forces. We have seen now upwards to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 Ukrainian brigades move into the Kherson area once controlled by Russian forces. Additionally, we have seen the Ukrainians conduct operations on this sand spit right here in this area. We have seen the Ukrainians cross on small boats, landing on this area, and then conduct operations against Russian forces. So how are the Ukrainians doing this? Well, they have the ability to do this because the U.S. HIMARS and other systems that have been deployed by the Ukrainian, even their own systems, Turkish systems have also been handed over as well, have made it very difficult for Russian forces to operate in this area. Just a few Ukrainian special operations forces crossing into this area give the Ukrainians the ability to sense and then engage Russian targets in this area. So any Russian motorized formation, airborne formation, National Guard formation in this area can be targeted very easily by Ukrainian forces. That's why you're probably seeing these Russian forces pull back a bit from this area. Very, very risky for the Russians to operate in this area, given the accuracy of these HIMARS systems and other systems as well. Now, will the Ukrainians land en masse in this area? Probably not. Not going to see that happen. But they are working to make it very uncomfortable for Russian forces south of Kherson. Next map. Avdiivka. We are seeing a fairly significant Russian operation to the north of Avdiivka. If the Russians are fully able to penetrate Ukrainian lines and encircle Ukrainian forces such as the 115th Mechanized Brigade operating defensive positions near Avdiivka, this will probably be more of a defeat for Ukrainian forces than even the loss of Bakhmut. But we can definitely see that the Russians are making a concerted effort north of Avdiivka to encircle the city from the north. They are also attacking from the south as well. In this area, you have 1, 2, 3 Ukrainian brigades, the 56th Motorized Rifle, 115th, and the 110th Mechanized Brigades. Bakhmut. The Russians continue high-intensity operations against the town of Bakhmut. The Russians, as with Avdiivka, look to be trying to encircle and attack the town from both the north and the south. Very difficult for the Russians to move along and just to the west of the M3 highway and attack and make frontal assaults against Bakhmut. The Ukrainians have done a hell of a job digging in around Bakhmut and have this battlescape has become a brutal conflict zone. But the Russians continue to progress the attack, continue high-intensity offensive operations against Ukrainian forces. Now we can expect at some point the Ukrainians will reinforce many of these positions, probably both at Avdiivka and Bakhmut, with those forces that they have moved or could be moving from Kherson. It's highly likely some of these brigades here that you see on the map, such as the 17th Tank Brigade, 63rd Mechanized Brigade, 24th Mechanized Brigade, could be redeployed to face off against Russian forces near Bakhmut, or even move south towards Zaporizhia. Now, there's been some talk about the possibility that we could see a joint Belarusian-Russian operation against Ukrainian forces north of Kiev. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think best case scenario for Russian forces and Belarusian forces is we could see an operation near Chernihiv, east of the Dnieper River. I do not believe we will see a joint Belarusian-Russian operation west of the Dnieper River. This area here. We're looking right now at a force construct of roughly 15,000 Belarusian forces and approximately 9,000 Russian personnel currently in Belarus. We know that elements of the Russian 2nd Motorized Division based outside of Moscow has deployed to Belarus. But again, that size of force, 15,000 Belarusian forces and 9,000 Russian forces, and again, not all of those are frontline combat troops, are going to give the Russians enough combat power to make a move west of the Dnieper River. Those forces could be used in a supporting role east of the Dnieper River if the Russians decide to launch renewed offensive operations in summer or late summer. But I don't believe at this point the Belarusian military has the capacity on its own and with limited Russian assistance to launch operations against Ukraine. The Belarusians could find themselves very quickly losing actual territory to the Ukrainian military along their shared border. So again, I think in all probability we'll see some sort of action late summer east of the Dnieper River, whether it be near Chernihiv or Sumy, difficult to say. If we do see a Russian offensive in these areas, that's probably where it's going to occur. I don't think the Russians at this point can maintain operations with just a focus on areas such as Avdiivka and Bakhmut. They are going to have to broaden their operations in order to be successful. But at the same time, I do believe that the continued efforts by the Russians in terms of attacking Ukrainian power supply and infrastructure is going to start to wear on the Ukrainians. But that's what we have for today. We will have more in the very near future. Thank you for joining us, and as always, have a good day, and especially here in the States, happy Thanksgiving.